Any future agenda items that the council would like to discuss?
Yes, Mayor, I do have one. So obviously, we're winding down on my term, so I think it's probably
Wait, what?
time. Try not to celebrate, people. Keep it reined in. I think it's a good time to talk succession in terms of board assignments. And then also we'll have a changing of mayor pro tem as well. So I think it might be a nice time to just talk about what that transition looks like as we move into January.
I think that's a good idea.
And it may be that we want to look at a shifting of positions, I don't know, but I think a larger discussion on boards and committees is a good one.
To get some direction from you, because it's kind of been on our radar, this side of the table, thinking about that. We think about November 8th. Is that too late to start having a discussion, or is that appropriate on the strategy work meeting? Okay.
Defer to my council members.
Well, I think to Nicole's point, I think the fact that we know that there are going to be some changes that, more planning's are always better than less planning. I would be in favor of probably moving it up a little bit, maybe just to discuss about.
And it might be nice, as we have that discussion going along, Clint's reasoning is that if we decide, we are going to decide to make some changes, it would be nice to have some transition meetings, at least one, where I could bring whomever. So for instance, to UFA, if I could bring whomever is going to take my place and do a nice professional handoff, I think that's just a nice way to do it.
So, look for some direction. First or second meeting in September, would that be better for you?
Yeah, why don't we?
Yeah.
You got any preference?
No preference.
I guess just however packed they are.
Yeah,
At least that.
Nicole's been actually discussing the part, especially Unified Fire, to bring people up to speed. That's a big organization and understanding, so that's probably more critical to get up to speed before the handoff. So we'll just look at the agenda and see how full it looks for the 11th. Is that correct, Jacqueline? Mm-hmm. And then we'll try to shoot that day, because I know we have some stuff going on the 25th. I'm trying to go off memory here. September 25th meeting. I know Rio Tinto's coming in about their mining operation, dust control, and all that stuff on the 25th. So we'll shoot for the 11th.
Okay.
Just to know, I'm showing on my calendar that on the 11th is also the ULCT conference that day too. So
Do they have anything that evening? I mean, they
yeah,
typically do have evening entertainment, but I don't
So,
know if anyone's
just
planning
need
on
to-
going.
see, those that are going to try and attend that and plan accordingly.
Wait, September 11th?
And we'll be sensitive to that. We only have a few of you going and very little staff going.
There is a league board meeting, one of those nights though, so let me just make sure.
It will be the Wednesday night.
So that would be a problem
Okay.
for me then, because I'll need to attend with my position on the board. So can we go either?
And given the fact that it's September 11th, I will probably be late.
Given the day.
Given the day, because there's some other things that I've been asked to participate in
Can I just,
that evening.
not to, I would like to have you both here at least by the 7 o'clock meeting.
That'll be my goal.
We have something planned special that night as well here.
Does it involve food?
They can't.
Okay, now.
Okay. Well then, yes, because I can be here.
Okay,
No, that
so-
should be fine. I think that it is I'll just have to boogie back. I think it's a 5 or 5:30, something like that.
Okay, so 7 o'clock, if we,
Should be fine.
we'll be conscious about the work meeting as well, so if we're gonna have members not here, all of you, because we all like have all 5 of you when we're discussing work items, so we get some direction. So we'll be sensitive to what we put on that load.
Just happens to fall
So
on a
we'll put
day
that
with
item
lots of
to the
other items.
25th then, and we'll,
It's 4:30 to 7 is my board of directors meeting, but nobody should talk that long, so just make sure I get up when I feel like talking should be done.
Have you met some of these people?
I know, myself included, but yes. All right. that's
Okay.
so I didn't hear again, I hope that all of you are gonna attend that night. Our team is actually definitely planning on something a little bit special.
We'll be there.
Just started a council meeting.
I am at the Wasatch Park meeting we had the other day for garbage. We are looking at becoming autonomous from the county. So kind of cutting the rest of those attachments with the county and just being a standalone, and in order to do that, it has to be like a unanimous thing, so everybody on the board, all their cities have to do a resolution that says, yes, we support this.
The council votes have to be unanimous?
Yeah, each member has to
Well,
have a council
Or
vote.
they,
No.
the majority per council?
Every city on the board
Yeah.
has to bring a resolution
Has to
that
pass
says
a
we support it.
resolution.
So it just has to
With our
pass here.
majority?
But it has to be unanimous on the board at the district. So, so I don't know if that just needs to be, there isn't a resolution made up yet, there's still some process that has to go through with the county, because we have to know if the county's gonna support it, because if the county doesn't support it, it doesn't go anywhere either.
Just slap pen, send to Tuesday.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there so you guys can be thinking if you'd be
You think it's gonna
supporting.
be done, ready to go by the 11th?
The hope is for the first of the year, we can be ready to do the split, so there, but there's a lot of
I don't
moving
think I
parts.
passed that thing a year, okay.
Yeah, but we have, really, the feeling was, we want to be able to come back to the board and say, yeah, we believe our council would be supportive of that, just have a thumbs up or a thumbs down, that yes or no, we'd be supportive of that.
As soon as they can get a draft of that, if you get it to us, we can review it and get ready to go and get it queued up.
Okay, really, there'd be nothing changed, there's, nothing really changes other than for the positive.
Okay.
And then, I don't know if you're planning on bringing this up in the city manager updates, but do we need to have it on the agenda, the issue that I emailed to you about the residents who were backing onto city property and there was.
That's a long
Property line
discussion, we
changes.
are gonna talk about that briefly, trying to get some direction where he wants to go with it.
Okay, but we're gonna talk about that tonight,
Yes, it's quite painful.
okay. I'm all the way around, I think it's quite painful for the residents and it's
I mean, it's
quite
painful, it's
for
just a
us.
lot of work, depending on what direction the council gives us.
Okay, and then, that was all I think,
So I've got one more that.
sorry.
No, I didn't, I was waiting for you to get done. So this is more of a process one, and I don't quite know how to characterize it, other than to say, we've discussed, so with our role of government, obviously, we operate as one body, and the communication between us is so important. I would love to have a discussion, on the tail end of my term, just to talk about how we are doing in that regard. We need to be seen as having one voice out in the broader community. I think it would be valuable, as we kind of talk about transition, that we talk about how we're doing, making sure that we have that good balance of our council members understanding what's going on, because, our opinions are being represented out there, whether or not they are accurately reflecting us. So how we want to label that, I don't know. I would just, like a governance, it's kind of a basic governance, and only bring it up because, we as a council are obviously sharing things with one another to make sure that we're on the same page. So there was an instance today where a decision was made and I was not brought in until afterwards. And so, again, I just, and that's sometimes happens, and that's fine. I just think it's worth a discussion moving forward. We have so many important projects that are on our future, that making sure that we're operating as one body and not losing sight of that, I think, is important. So I don't know how you feel on that, but that's what I'm putting on the table.
No, I definitely support that. It's challenging, again, as many different boards and committees and things that we all sit on and again are expected to represent the whole will of the council. It does become challenging at times to make sure that, I know sometimes I'm like, man, did I communicate that piece to the rest of the council, or was it this piece that I did? And
I think just a reminder.
And I think just a reminder of doing that, and obviously we don't have Jared here tonight, which I think it's important to have us all part of
For
that
that
conversation, and maybe even we can roll that into when we start talking to bring up the boards and committee assignments and that, and again, just a good general discussion about that on how we ensure that continues to happen moving forward. But I definitely support a discussion on that.
Yeah, I actually talked to Jared and a couple other people about this last night, was that it's become so difficult because your intent is to always make it transparent in a public process. You want everyone to know what's being talked about, but we have such limited time that we can talk together and make decisions together. And you can't just conference call all of you and say, hey, what do you think about this? Because that's a meeting and it's not public. And so you have to hit and miss, and you might call that person and not get a hold of them, and you have to know what's going on, and you know what I mean, it just becomes really difficult to
does.
really understand, and I think, I always want to know, it's always much better to have everybody there so you can bounce ideas off of each other, but you can't unless you're in, you know,
In
in
the
this,
same room.
in this room,
And we
it's
notice
been
it appropriately and all
Yeah,
this.
it's so
I feel-
hard.
The analogy
It's
that I always think of when we have this discussion is I feel like it's the elementary school thing where one person starts with a message and whispers it in the ear, because when it gets to the end, it's like, what were you talking about?
Exactly.
Sometimes I feel like that's how it is in the format that, just as you mentioned, Sherry, of how we, want to be transparent and need to be transparent and all of those things. We have some limiting factors there that make it difficult at times, and especially to Nicole's point is we have so many things that are moving all the time in the city, and this board and that board, and making sure that we keep everyone in the loop and be able to have that discussion, I think would be very helpful.
Particularly as it relates to growth items, we have all of these boards and committees that each one of us is representing our body as a whole. And where our stance is accurately articulated is very important, because it is going to reflect with those in the broader community, whether those be the county or our legislators, other mayors. And so our voices need to be clear as it pertains to those really weighty growth issues, whether they be transportation, other infrastructure needs. So at any rate, we don't need to belabor it because we're going to talk about it at a future meeting, but I think it would be helpful.
I put that down for September 25th as well.
Okay.
We'll be talking about
Is
other items about
combine
boards. I think it's a good segue into that discussion.
Thank you.
We'll do that in the work meeting, by the way, so.
That's great.
Any other items you'd like to see on a future agenda? Okay. With that, we'll move on to item 3.1, discussion related to hunting on city property and within city limits. Justin Edwards, our Public Works Director.
This is one of the items come up, with big pressures to hunt on city property. The Division of Natural Resources has been invited here by Justin Edwards to talk about these trails and things, what's the possible direction this council wants to go, because right now, they can hunt up there. Is that the right thing to be doing? We don't know. We're trying to get direction by you all. And so we'll let Justin take off with it.
So Brett had a good intro there, so I have these fine gentlemen from the Wildlife Resources here, to kind of help explain if you have questions, or they can explain some of the laws and rules around hunting and things. So, we have Wes Alexander, who's been a great partner with us through the Urban Deer Program. So I work very closely with Wes, and he's been a great resource for us. We have Rusty and Ray, who I don't know as well as Wes, but they're here to answer your questions. So to kind of continue on with Brett, hunting's been allowed up on the hills forever, essentially. But it hasn't always been the city's own property on the hillside. So one of the concerns we have now is we want to allow that hunting to happen on city property. Right now, we really don't have anything that says they can't, and so we want to come to you to kind of get some direction on how to move forward on putting a plan together. We do nothing, we want to allow it, we want to restrict it in certain areas, we want to restrict it to a certain type of weapon, those types of things. And so as we have trails going up there now and continue to get constructed, you have those conflicts. Now, the one thing that's kind of brought a little more interest is the DWR this year put in what's called an extended archery hunt. And that allows, after the archery hunt ends, hunters can now come and hunt the areas, which now has been put in place here. There's other areas that it's been in place throughout the state. The Wasatch Front is a big one that's been in place for multiple years, and they've had their concerns and issues.
You're saying the extended archery hunt has
Yes.
been, okay.
Along the Wasatch
Along the
Front, they have one in Duchesne, they have some down south, up in,
But you guys extended it to our area this year?
yes.
But are these far less populated areas where the extended hunt is,
It's
or not
along the
necessarily?
Wasatch, so the hunting boundary goes all the way from the top of the mountain to I-15. And so it's similar to what we see here. As you can see, the boundary here essentially goes from, to the south, our city boundary line, following Mountain Quarter to the east to Main Street, all the way west along Main Street, and then kind of follows Butterfield Canyon up around High Country. So that's the area that they're allowed to hunt in the extended archery, as long as they have permission to do so. As you can see on the map, it also indicates federal, state, and private lands As you can see, the majority of the area is private. There's some federal lands to the west up above High Country 1 and 2. And there's a small little section of BLM property to the south boundary of Herriman right there against Camp Williams. As you can see that little blue triangle. So, to hunt private property, you have to have written permission to do so from the property owner. So with Herriman City ownership, it's public land, and so how do we want to handle that? So I guess the time is now to you a little bit to voice your concerns or ask questions or kind of have some thoughts so we have a little direction.
From a safety standpoint, what are the safety issues that arise by having hunters near the trails, and what liability then comes to the city if someone gets hurt in that situation if we allow hunting on our
It's hard to know the liability. I mean, the conflicts happen all the time on the Wasatch Front, the trails, and Ray, you may be able to speak to that a little bit if you don't mind.
Well, the Wasatch Front Extended Archery Area has been in effect for 15 or more years. And initially, there was a lot of trepidation about hunters and cyclists and hikers and the potential for accidents, but it's never happened.
Okay.
We've never had an incident where somebody got shot with an arrow or a rifle for that matter. All along the Wasatch Front, which are some of the most heavily populated trails and canyons in the state.
Can I ask a question that, because Court Canyon is heavily used, and my understanding there's archery hunting up in that area?
Only above the upper Corner Canyon Trail up on the hillside, but down in the lower Corner Canyon where all those bike trails and stuff are, no.
Okay,
We've closed that, just
because there's so much activity.
a lot of activity, and that's also what the city wanted. So,
That's within city limits, correct?
yes, yeah, it's in the city limits of Draper City. And they have an ordinance against the discharge of weapons within their city limits, so it basically excludes hunters anyway.
So they have an ordinance at all weapons, not just rifles, not just firearms.
Yes. I believe they do in Draper. A lot of the cities have drafted their own ordinances to that regard. Sometimes they're very specific, sometimes they're quite general.
So far, I think we're the only city that allows hunting in the city limits,
Right.
in the Salt Lake Valley.
I personally see absolutely no issue with archery. If you've ever hunt archery, first of all, having a bunch of people going by isn't really conducive to having a deer stand there while you shoot at it. So, typically I could see where there would be no incidences because it's not the nature of the hunt. And, so I wouldn't have a problem at all with that. That's part of my opinion.
I think that's a good point, if I might. Having hunted the Wasatch Extended for years, hunters typically will use a lot of the trails to access where they want to hunt, but just, I think hunters and bow hunters in particular are just kind of cryptic by nature. You might pass the hikers and bikers, but they don't want to be hunting by the hikers and bikers and dogs and everything else. They're going to use the trails to access where they want to be, but then get away.
I see the point you're making with archery. I don't disagree necessarily. I think at the outset, I would just see them as incompatible uses solely because what we're trying to do with all of our wilderness area is create a recreation destination. And we've talked about all of the many things we want to do with that, and that has become very much for us a potential impetus for economic development, none of which I want to take away from it all. So I would just tend to stick with, the other cities and their a little bit stricter policies. I could be persuaded perhaps on the archery, but nothing beyond that for me.
Well, we currently allow archery hunting anyway in our city. We hire people to come and do it. And I guess that's my issue with archery. I just simply think if you hunt archery, you're not gonna get a shot if people are riding by on their bikes and the dogs are everywhere. It's just not gonna happen. Not in the world I've ever hunted in anyway. So I would be supportive of continuing to allow archery, especially in our foothills and stuff like that.
Well, we would still allow that as part of our urban deer program. That doesn't affect anything.
Right,
That's
right.
controlled by the city.
Yeah.
Sure. I guess my point was that we still are harvesting animals, and in the city, and maybe we look at it and limit it more to just the foothills, so that we're not just having people running around, because I can show you pictures out my garden a few days ago, there was 5 nice bucks right there, but it probably wouldn't have been very good for me to shoot at them with the neighborhood next door. So, you know what I mean, so maybe.
How good of a shot are you, Sherry?
Exactly. Maybe we put in some sort of parameters like that, but, I guess back to your point about recreation, hunting is a recreation, so then again, we isolate another group of people who have been forever able to recreate on these hills. I used to hunt up there a long time before Herriman ever became Herriman. So, and I'm not saying that it doesn't change as we grow, I understand that, but I still think that we can allow some of that type of recreation. I agree that it would not be a good idea to have long range rifles up there and shooting, because that's a whole different ballgame. But, certainly archery, I think, should be allowed in the foothills for sure. But that's how I feel.
Well, I grew up, you know, a hunter, and that is a recreation for a lot of people. And I agree on the archery. I think that's easily doable. The only thing that, to Nicole's point, the only thing that does start to give me pauses is, again, we get more other types of recreation out there, and in that intermixing with rifles, shotguns, those types of things for different types of hunts is, you know, obviously safety is paramount, and we
Sure.
want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind. And so I understand that, you know, there may not be quite the accessibility into some of those areas today that we may, you know, anticipate opening in the next 5 to 10 years, something like that. But again, I don't want to we still have a lot to offer in our community, and I don't want to take away that type of recreation, as you've mentioned. But the safety aspect of that with the rifles is the only thing that gives me some pause on as I think about that.
Sure. And the other thing with archery is that the more and more access and use you have on your trails, the less and less likely people don't want to hunt there anyway. You have to be able to get a shot. And so if you have constant traffic of foot traffic and bike traffic and stuff, then it naturally weeds it out, because it just doesn't, it's not conducive to that sport.
Yeah, I know the 4 bucks in my neighborhood are pretty comfortable with everyone
Right.
around
As
them.
long as they're down in, for sure, right?
Yeah.
They were at my house the other day too. I was thankful for the fence. They didn't eat the garden.
So, I think this one's a hard one for me, because I look at this as one, primarily our role is public safety, and anytime we're allowing weapons to be used within city limits in an uncontrolled manner, that gives me pause. I think we're all in agreement on firearms. I don't think that's even really a question. I would not support the use of firearms for hunting in city limits. I think I would be on the side of the fence of saying that we should follow the lead of other cities and not allow hunting within our city limits, so that we don't end up in a situation where we have all of the hunters coming to our city simply because we're the only ones that allow it. I would hate to see something happen because I don't want to see another frisbee golf situation show up where we're now putting 2 incompatible uses, residential, right next to something that could be fairly dangerous, and then having problems between hunters and residents. And so for now, I mean, I'm willing to consider archery, but it would take a lot to convince me that we should allow hunting within the city limits at all, outside of our deer mitigation program. That's my 2 cents.
Can I make a couple, I guess, just follow-up comments to that? One, I guess I'll disagree just a little bit with just the comment in terms of uncontrolled, because I think hunting seasons are very controlled. I think that the hunters are very responsible, and there's obviously processes that they have to go through in order to obtain the different licenses that they have to hunt. So like I say, I don't necessarily agree that it's an uncontrolled atmosphere in which they're doing it. And like I say, my next question is currently our policy is that there is hunting in city limits. What have been our, because I don't know that there's been a lot of complaints brought to us over the issue. What complaints or issues have we had over the last little while dealing with concerns over people that are doing appropriate hunting within city limits based on, you know, the appropriate licenses and everything else that goes along with it.
The only complaints we've had is when we've told them they can't hunt on city property. So the issue comes down, if we allow hunting, we tell them they can do it on private property. And so they go to those private property owners and they pay some fee to go on the land. And they'll go do baiting and other things to try to get things going. And so if we open up to our city property, are we gonna allow baiting? How many are we gonna allow? Who are we gonna structure? Can you shoot across the trail? Are we gonna say you can't shoot something within 30 feet of a trail? Are we gonna start defining? So if we decide to allow an archery hunt, we probably ought to come back to, are we gonna let 10 people do it? How do we select them? Is it a lottery? How many do they get to pull out of the area? So it's
Well,
probably.
if you have 10 people do it, they only get to pull 10 out.
Whatever the, you know, the DDR tells them. Right, but,
The only thing
but if they don't
is
get one, they come back.
people calling in want to get access, they wanna drive their four-wheelers and their side-by-sides and their trucks and stuff to get access in there. And, we had this in the last 2 weeks, spring cane up the cove, up by Daryl's house, they're mad because, and the road's blocked off. Well, at the end of that road, it's private property, it's not city property. And it's not our fight, but city property is public property. We've not had issues, but we are building a lot more trails. We've had hunting geese out here, we've hunted coyotes out here, they've hunted antelope out here, they've hunted deer. I've known people that get permits from this fine office and chase and treat cougars, and it's been going on. It doesn't mean it's right, but I share with the concern that we've not had any issues yet. We probably had more issues of a bad hunter hitting a deer down in here, down around Old City Town, and the deer run through the city with a deer arrow sticking through it. That's probably been our biggest complaint, that they didn't have a true good harvest, you know, clean harvest. I'll be quiet about it. But you know, it's been going on. We haven't had an issue, doesn't mean we won't have an issue, because how many miles more trail do you build this year for cyclists and stuff?
4.5.
That's quite a few miles up on the mountain, so we are sensitive, and that's why we're bringing it to you. We don't wanna go down the path and all of a sudden we have a big problem and then try to react to that. We wanna try to stay forward thinking. Back in the day, I used to archery hunt too, and you have to be very careful. You have to be very quiet to get that shot. And, so I think there's some compromises. We just look for some directions. Right now I'm hearing, we need that fifth person here.
Well, another question then that I'll ask is, should we choose to, I guess, open up the city lands to do it, how much more now work and management is that gonna put on our staff in order to facilitate some of this on top of an already busy workload?
They've been up there for the last few years.
Enforcement, I think, of that, I think would a lot fall on HPD. If we wanted to.
We're fine, move ahead.
If we wanted to regulate, as someone alluded to, permits and only allow a certain amount, that would fall upon city staff.
Right.
And that would be a burden. But as far as following the laws on where you can and can't hunt and those types of things, I think a lot of the burden, I think HPD would
Just
get the call, and
HPD right
DWR would get the call and have to.
And we
have
do
to
get
handle
calls.
that. Yeah.
We've gone over on the bird hunters on the north end, we've gone on deer hunters, but when we go there, we check their tag and it's fine.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't had an issue, we haven't had any reported where somebody was shot or their
Yeah.
bike was shot out from underneath them. However, we are going to see, as the population grows, more of those calls.
More of those.
And we are probably going to see some mix-ups on the trail eventually between a bicyclist and a hunter.
The thing I'd like our fine guests to address is, as we discussed it amongst us staff, is probably the same thing as you think about, is managing wildlife. And that's a lot of your job. How do we manage the size, disease control, all those things. That's why you don't trap and transport anymore, because that was hurting herds elsewhere.
Well, hunting seasons are put in place for a reason.
Yeah, and that's their component of this. If we don't allow it, we may help boost the population again.
Might add to that, one of the reasons this hunt was added was try to help with urban deer issues. Herriman's been a great partner, with the urban deer program. Again, not advocating for people to run around in the middle of the town, but the more you can focus on the outskirts, that you can hopefully limit the number, reduce the number of there that are causing problems within town.
And there's a season, so Tammy's team can always pop it out there, remind people that are using the trails, pump it out there, hey, archery season is going on right now, be cautious of that, or be aware of that there will be people in our foothills utilizing those resources for that. I think, and 15 years of never having an incident along the whole Wasatch Front, that's a big deal. Because I know there's a lot of people that hunt up there, use that extended archery, a lot of people.
And hiking,
And tons of use of it,
All the
yeah,
recreation.
for sure,
uses.
for sure. So, I mean, it hasn't shown the inability to coexist. And so I understand the concern about safety for sure, but I also understand about archery hunting, and it's just not the same as sitting on a trail and scoping in a deer 500 yards away, you know what I mean? It's much different than that.
Do we know if Draper closed that down based on incidences, or was it just a preemptive?
I don't,
That's a good question.
I couldn't tell you 100% sure, I don't know. I'm not aware of any instances that there doesn't mean that there wasn't some, but I'm not aware of.
Well, given that they moved it above their trails, I would just guess that again, they're looking at that recreational element of their bike paths being incompatible with that, and that's where I'm sitting right now. It may not be as incompatible right now, but we are going to grow and grow heavily, and we have a lot of grand plans for that area. So if I was going to be forced to make a decision, I would fall on the no side of things, or very restrictive to your point of keeping it to the point where it is, accomplishing the purpose of limiting the population, but in no way, or in very little way, becoming a problem with where we're headed. And maybe we look at it on an ongoing, which I'm sure we will, we'll look at it on an ongoing yearly
and I was just
basis. So
thinking
maybe
too-
it's a year kind of,
What's
let's
our,
try it and see.
give us our timeframes of what the hunt entails this year when that season is completely passed.
September 14th to November 30th, 2.5 months.
And after that, then
Then it's close
that piece is done, right?
until next August.
So, just throwing out there what the council entertain, leaving it as is right now and getting through this upcoming season, and then having them come back in and with Justin do a review of this year and see if we've had any instances and where they were and what the circumstances were, and then maybe that'll give us some better information in order to be able to go on to decide maybe we need to limit this access to this area or this area.
With a limit to archery this year, which is that how
we'd
this
have,
is right now?
we'd have to still pass something before.
Our park ordinance prohibits archery.
so we'd have to
So
come
we'd
back
have to
to
redo
you.
our park ordinance.
So we'd wanna come back to you with some rules and an ordinance change to allow them to come out and hunt on the open space. Cause right now, we tell them no, that's our ordinance. And so if you want to allow it, if you want us to bring some rules or some other things, we're more than happy to do that.
Oh, I wanna stick with it.
With our parks.
And the other issue too is that we don't own the whole mountain. It's private and
I
it's
know, but I
public
remember
owned,
this
and so it just creates an issue if you say, oh, you can't hunt right here, but you can hunt right here. You're still gonna have hunters there.
Right now,
It's like standing on the other side of the
Exactly,
CMW fence or.
yeah.
It's really limited because only the private property owners are letting people, and they're charging, so it's a very, very select few that are actually doing hunting. So we've not had a,
And they're regulating on their property, I'm sure, right?
yeah, so they regulate and they do that. We've pretty much told people no, and so if we choose to say yes, we just probably want to figure out if we want to have additional rules up there and bring that back to you, so.
We actually bounced on one more idea off, was probably try to be forward thinking is, we've had great success with urban deer harvesting and with no incidents out there at all. It's been very clean, very responsible. But we thought maybe because that process is so defined, if the city, because I do believe in controlling the herds, I am a component of that, because we've gone from over 100 deer getting hit on the roads every year down to almost nothing. So it's been a huge effect on our daily lives. So I was thinking maybe we do it by permit, which is something like Justin would have to manage, but cause he likes deer. But they, same process, they have a process of screening, make sure they're a good hunter, they're a competent shot, they know what they can do with how they harvest the animal, how they take care of it. the same type of process, and I thought, done such a good job with it, maybe that'd be a way, and then all of a sudden it's a draw, because people like to have areas that are limited hunts.
Oh, yeah.
So are we essentially saying it's an extension of the urban deer mitigation
Yes, but
program?
but they have.
But it's within the confines of the regular hunt.
And it would be allowing private hunters, not just contracted hunters.
And they can do a draw on it, but they have to be certified, they have to go through a process. And it's just another idea, I want to put out in a thought process, trying to find that compromise.
I would say from a division standpoint, that could get very messy
I know, that's why this is gonna be his problem.
and clunky.
When I hear the word clunky, I don't like that.
Well, he's talking deprivation permits, is that, because that ended, and we have to reapply for that, so it's not,
Well, I mean,
so it is.
if you have hunters that have a permit in their pocket and all of a sudden they learn that they've now gotta go through an additional city draw to see if they can hunt that, I think that kind of defeats the purpose of what the hunt was designed for. And while we're talking about it, it just kind of occurred to me that this from the west, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's been some conversations about habitat projects, maybe up in the foothills to kind of suck urban deer out of town and keep them in the hills and those, those projects are paid for with sportsman dollars. And so if there's no hunting allowed, I don't see the powers that be committing funds to do stuff like that, you know what I mean?
Which is understandable.
Anyway, just kind of occurred to me.
So, do we like Clint's suggestion, run through this cycle, or you wanna try to bring you something back, narrow it down to just archery?
I was until I realized we have to go back and change what we're currently doing. If we were sitting in a place where we had a resolution in place that allowed it, but where it's currently not allowed in public parks, I'm falling on the no side.
So
I don't wanna make any
that
changes.
confused me a little bit, because when we first started the conversation,
It was allowed.
It was allowed, and so. is
It's
it
allowed
or
in
is it
city
not?
limits, but on our property, we
On
don't allow
private
it.
property within the city.
So it's allowed on private property in the city. We could allow it by state statute like this, but we don't allow it on our
We're not
property.
sure we all agree with this.
So I could have shot those deer in my yard.
You can, yeah, it's hunting, we don't have any hunting regulations in the city. It's all governed by the state.
Would you say
Deer.
shoot?
Sorry.
Then you have a problem with proximity to other structures.
So I'm sorry, can you expound on that, proximity with the state, what are the state regulations on that?
The state regulations, what the Division of Wildlife follows is state code about discharge of any kind of weapons, either whether firearms or archery tackle. And what it says is you have to be at least 600 feet away from any occupied structure, like a home, or a building that's regularly occupied by people, or corrals that contain livestock. So it's at least 200 yards away from any of those places, and that includes firearms as well as archery tackle.
Or across roads.
And then on roads, you can't shoot from, on, or across the road, so that means there's no defined distance from the side of the road, but you can't shoot across it or be standing on it when you're shooting.
You could do the same thing with trails, you could say you can't be on or shoot across the trail.
Unfortunately, the state code doesn't say anything
Right.
about
But we
trails.
could add that,
but-
that if we want, if do something like that to say they can't shoot on or across the trail.
Yeah.
But it'd be hard to
Hard to enforce.
Hard to enforce.
I think it's,
General here.
We have so many trails up there, there's no really a place you can.
And I think that's why cities usually fall under the yes or no. I don't know of many that have a hybrid, hey, do it here, not here. It's typically more urban cities no and more rural city yes. that I
Look how
know.
much challenge we have with the fireworks maps.
Right.
Put them out there and.
People break that.
I think
Yeah.
over there,
Yeah.
right?
So,
More rural
just
areas.
saying.
Don't have any problem with that.
One example where something like this occurred was in Immigration Canyon, where they wanted to close the whole place to hunting period. And the Division of Wildlife still needed harvest there, so we worked out an arrangement with them where their township became an archery-only area. And, since that happened, there have been 0 complaints, and there's still been harvest. It's not been a problem, so you might wanna check with them, but.
That's the direction I would lean, as I would be very supportive of it, just simply because the elements of archery are much different. It's not, there's calculated shooting, you have to stalk your animal, you can't be running across the hillside to make a good shot, so.
And this particular hunt is an archery hunt, that's what it
Exactly,
addresses.
exactly.
And we have had a sharp decrease in animal vehicle accidents since we've started to harvest Justin.
Right.
Literally from hundreds to none.
So when would we need to have, if we were to allow it, when would we have to have the ordinance in place to affect this?
Next council meeting.
And that to me feels rushed.
So
I'm a no on this one.
the current ordinance is without a permit. They would have to come to the city and get a permit for archery, that's how the current ordinance
Is
reads.
that a city permit?
Yes, we would have to come up with.
Which gets point of.
That goes back to being messy
Is-
with.
Does Yellow Fork allow any hunting? No,
I heard the county closed.
so there's no, I think,
County closed.
I think one of the differences between us and Draper or Sandy is that they have tons of BLM land, right, or National Forest Service land adjacent to them, and we just don't. And so I'm trying to figure out if that is a factor that makes it different than the east side.
Wendy, what's your opinion?
That's, I go back and forth, right, because my family's a hunting family, my husband does archery, I get it. But people keep trying to compare us to Draper and Sandy, and it's just not the same story. And so, in our area, we're surrounded by Camp Williams and private property. And so there's really a very limited space for them to go. I go back and forth, because I do see the value in it. It's a great way to recreate outdoors, and it does help with those populations. And maybe there isn't a big interest in this area, I don't know.
Do we know if there's an interest?
There's an interest. We could get quite a few people up here if we told them that they could come on city property.
What about, high country, can they hunt there?
No,
Right.
in there.
Right, so I doesn't allow it. And then there may BLM, right
No,
behind them?
no, they're, behind them, there's portions of BLM up to the
Yeah.
west of them. That green stuff is the BLM.
Yeah.
So that's where they can
They
hunt.
back onto BLM, right?
And then they can't hunt in any of that section of Yellow Fork, right?
No, yeah, they can't hunt in none of the county property.
And do we know why the county has said no from our,
Gordon said.
I talked them out of it.
Oh.
They had the conflicts, when they talked with their hikers and the bikers, they brought a public process, and there's more bikers and hikers than there are hunters.
Alright, for my opinion at this point, for final answer for me today, I'm not willing to move that quickly on changing our policies and our regulations. One city council meeting, I don't think is enough time for us to flesh out what we need to flesh out to allow that to be done in a safe manner. However, I am open to setting something up for next year so that we do have those rules and requirements in place so that hunters are able to go and do that for archery only. But for this year, I would not be supportive of making any changes to allow hunting on city property.
And I would add, if that's the case, March is when we set those season dates and set everything up. And it'd be nice to know what the plan is before we give it to the public and say, here's a hunt.
I'd have no problem getting it done in that time, kind of a time frame, but for.
Where are you actually?
I mean, yes, I just don't think archery's an issue. I think that firearms is an issue in the size of our city, absolutely. But I think with the intricacies of archery, I just don't think it's an issue. I think it has much more benefit than potential issues.
Well, I've already said.
You're sticking with it now? I'm with Sherry. I would be in favor of continuing the
There you
discussion
go,
on it.
split it.
And
Which
for,
means it does not pass.
for archery,
So, per our guidelines on the council, it would need to be a majority. So 50-50 means that it doesn't move forward, is my understanding.
Then I would request it be on the next council meeting, on the agenda. Talk about it.
I don't have any problem with that.
Do you want, in an effort to prepare for that, a report from HPD and maybe we can pull some UPD records, which might be more
Yeah.
indicative of what happened, if what
Absolutely.
issues.
Even
Yeah,
like
it's all
your question
beneficial for
about
the
Draper
conversation.
City, why did they close it? Those kind of answers would be great to have answers to.
We'll try and get with UPD and
Do you want regulations and proposed things, or is it just how you permits and
Well,
stuff
I think
like that?
scenarios are not, I think having some scenarios would be helpful to the discussion, so why, just more work for you, so yeah.
Well, it's really Justin and Wendy actually, so we're-
Naturally.
I'm in favor, let me just clarify, and Sherry, you can add in, but I'm in favor of considering opening it up to archery only onto our lands with the minimal amount, obviously, to be cumbersome to us to do it, but I think that there's pros to allowing that to happen on city property for natural reasons of hunting and keeping that urban deer population down.
I do too, and the residential, issue that the neighbor, alluded to, it's not an issue because there's already state regulations that keep them out of the
Keep
middle
them out
of
of
the
there
town
anyways.
anyway.
Yep.
So it's not, as far as the conflict between residents and them, 600 feet's a pretty long ways away.
We'll revisit.
All right, thank you, Justin, we appreciate it. All right, we're gonna move on to a discussion of the RSL Training Academy local consent permit. Gordon?
Yes, so RSL wants to have.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you.
Have an event in their, training facility, or they have a event room, and they want to have alcohol served there, but they can't do it without a consent from the city. We needed to expedite this, so
This is a single event,
a
correct?
single one event, and they have a reception room up there where they are doing this event. And so, in order to get approval, the council has to approve that. We put it on the consent agenda for tonight, and,
I have no concern.
yeah, I just didn't think anybody have concern, but we
Do
just
you have
wanted.
concern with that?
I don't know.
I appreciate
know
you,
what it's
I
at,
appreciate
so
you
you
bringing
can
it up
just
to talk about it here, so everyone can say, but I understand that the state statute that requires these for single events. Appreciate you bringing it up, but I'm concerned with it.
So we'll have a vote, and then we'll sign it and get it to them.
And just for future, I would just say, when it comes to these types of single events, that they go through the normal process, within the city, and that can come for approval, in the council meeting. And the only time that I would say that we need to hear about it beforehand is if there's some type of concern that's expressed as part of the application.
All right, we'll do that in the future, we'll just go
And
straight.
that
to
should
consent.
help help those individuals that are applying for those single events.
All right, moving on to 3.3, general plan update discussion.
All right. A little PowerPoint. Oh, I gotta click this, this is really exciting.
Don't put your eye out, Gordon.
Gordon's got a clicker.
Especially when blue is on the slides.
What color's the laser?
There, just.
There you go.
There we go.
Nothing to see here.
So, what we have here, just kind of some of the events that have taken part as far as the general plan. These are events that have taken place, these are events yet to take place. We anticipate trying to get this approved, by January, February timeframe, and so that's what we're looking at. So we just have a couple things we wanted to just run by the council. So this is the existing general plan as is today. And one of the things we do in our previous general plan in practice is look at our future annexation areas and do some planning for those as well. And we wanted to just kind of talk about these as three different groups. You have High Country 1 and 2, you have Olympia Hills, and then Rio Tinto. And then I'll talk just briefly about the property above U-111. So High Country 1 and 2, real quickly, High Country 1 has about 15 vacant lots, it's about 700 acres, and I think the City Council supports what they're doing there and doesn't have any concern. We don't anticipate annexing it for many, 20 years. But High Country 2, they still have about 250 units that could be sold there. They're about 2,000 units. So there's a total of about 3,000 units of 5. Some of them could be 2.5 acres, so I don't want to.
There's great density there.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
No, I'm telling you, the city's supportive, and they have infrastructure issues, but they're.
Water issues, right?
They have water, they have sewer, they have a lot of issues,
Yeah.
but
They got sewer
The roads.
issues, they've got.
roads, storm drain, but
discussion for another day.
outside of our city. So our anticipation is on the general plan is to leave it as 5 acre, 2.5 acre. And we show it outside the city, so everybody knows our intent, if that was to annex, would stay that kind of zone. That was easy. Then we have Kennecott. This is a kind of a plan we had drawn up initially. This is kind of where Bullfrog City, this is the annexation that we did there. This is kind of what we had shown you earlier. Kennecott, this just shows you some of the detail that's come in. We've been working with other folks, but Kennecott came back with this plan. They wanted to do some residential in the middle and do some industrial on the outside. They were looking at, they had quite a bit of density in terms of where the residential was. They had about, why is it sideways? About 82 acres of 20 units, so it's kind of apartment, and then you have townhomes, and then the single family is what they were looking at. And that was their proposal back to us, and the council saw this, and this is what we looked at previously. This is kind of the Olympia Hills, what they have submitted to the county most recent. This again shows the density that they have in their application, what they're looking at. And then we did the study with Bonneville Research that said the city's plan is adequate to serve residents roughly between 3 to 5 units right now. Higher densities would be a greater impact to the city's infrastructure, and we need additional funding to mitigate. So if we go above that, we'd have to allocate or find additional resources outside of what we normally would plan for to get above these units. So that would be a kind of a critical element for the city council to think about. This is especially true for transportation. So as we look at this general plan, we're trying to be sensitive to property owners, what the infrastructure allows, what's going on, and kind of dynamics of the world. And so things for the city council to kind of think about as we replace residential with industrial or commercial. That makes a huge difference because traffic now uses the roadways differently. It impacts the parks differently. It does a lot of really good things for us in that sense. And so the residents can be maybe pushed on, however we look at that, but that's a big benefit.
And with our police force also, I mean,
For
our emergency
everything,
responders,
police,
huge
and
difference.
emergency response, and public works, and everything.
Yeah.
Residential has a lot more streets and storm drains than industrial site does. Rio Tinto's proposed density was to match kind of the Olympia Hills. Olympia Hill has a huge impact whether it's in or outside the city, just because the road infrastructure is going to bring them through us, particularly on that. And then the last comment is above U111. If you look out there, there's a lot of foothills before you get to the mine. They don't plan to develop anything above U111 for 20 years plus. But we're running sewer lines. We're working with the water infrastructure. We're working with road infrastructure. And to this date, no one's really looked above U111. And we're not saying we need to, because I'll be gone in 20 years, but there'll be another generation that would appreciate us to have at least thought about it. And so today, in none of our general plans have we given that any credibility that would have any impact in our city. Certainly it would be a lot less dense just because of the terrain, but there is still a lot of land that's up there before you get to the mine. So as we go through these are the things we're wrestling with the general plan to try to bring you the right things so that when we see you again in February to vote on this, we're very happy with what you see.
But you'll be more
I hope
updates.
we see you before that.
Yeah,
So February.
So we don't have to talk about this again until February.
Well, yeah, so that might be, I'm a
Too.
little bit alluding to that, but what I'm suggesting is, this is, the planning commission's gonna make recommendations. So by the time you see this, the staff has hopefully reflected your opinions to, and this is integrated so that we don't go through this whole process. We've had a number of those public hearings you saw earlier showing them things, and then all of a sudden, there's a we haven't been tied close enough to the council that we just wanna make sure that as we go through the public process and the planning commission process, that we haven't left you out of the loop enough that we've just come to you and shock you. That's not the goal.
I was throw something out there just as a consideration, just because, it might naturally flow with the high country, that we keep that, anything on the other side of U-111, the same type of thing as high country, 2.5, 5 acre kind of stuff. Because then it all butts up against the mountains, they can do trails and things like that into there, it's just a thought.
Do we want to talk to Kennecott how they feel about that? It's their property.
For sure.
And just see their opinions on that. Just
Yeah.
again, we're running sewer, water, power, gas, all this infrastructure up there, and we just need to make sure that it's compatible to the amount they're going to be expecting.
So, and that was really gonna be my comment in terms of really a lot of that stuff that's in our annexation declaration of planning out there, and that is, you know, have the opportunity, as I've been able to share with some of the council members with Gordon and Brett and Jared earlier today to meet again with some of the Rio Tinto executives, and I think, yes, this is the city's general plan, but to your point, Gordon, we have to remember that that is owned by other property owners, this land that we're talking about, and the way to actually do an effective general plan and have something that really can be a guide to us moving forward is to have those conversations and to include them in that planning process and to keep that dialogue open. And that was really our focus today, is to say that we still have an immense interest in working together to form a good plan. You know, we talk about what our infrastructure can support currently. Well, it doesn't mean that that's all it can support. It just means we have to do additional planning and preparation and make other considerations in there if we want to approve something that goes beyond that. And that's all part of this discussion of continuing to have open dialogue, continuing to have open planning. And this is a great time and opportunity as we look at that and even beyond, you know, to your point, we've never looked beyond, U-111 is like nothing existed west of that.
It's the end of the world.
It's the end of the world. And we all clearly know that it's not, and that someday, many, many years, where none of us will be sitting around this table, that's for sure. I mean, they'll probably all be hovering around it on some type of hover chair or something like that. But to that point, we should be at least talking and saying, okay, knowing that, you know, the mining operation is gonna continue for many, many years, and we hope that it does, because that's a great thing really for our local economy. What do you foresee that it looks like beyond that? And I think that's what we communicated today, and I think that's what we should communicate through this process, is this is about sitting down with partners and having a good plan.
Have you talked to them about that? No? Sorry, I missed that. Okay, so they have some ideas. Cool.
So we just wanna make sure that you're aware of some of the stuff, because it's going through processes that we wanna make sure the council is not getting something different, has a different idea than what shows up. And so we'll probably keep talking to you about that as we go forward.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it. We'll move on to 3.4, discussion pertaining to various surplus properties. Bill, you got it, Gordon?
Hope all my animations work in this, because they're exciting. We'll see, I tested it. So, we have a handful of surplus properties as the city's developed over the years. We've noticed a few places where maybe property's been deeded to us for one reason or another. We're going through them and we're kind of saying, we don't need this anymore. Most of them are coming to our attention because they're not being maintained, or there are issues for someone's side yard. So, I'm gonna go through these 4 parcels, and I had 5 in the staff report, but one of them, as we dug into it deeper today, I think the county recorded it incorrectly. We did some title search on it and found out that it's recorded as right of way, and it really should just be an easement between 2 property owners. So we don't need to do anything with that one. So each one of these, I'll just ask if you want us to go forward with the surplus process or not. And these are the 4 parcels, just kind of spotting them out there.
I like that.
That was a great
Oh.
animation. Ooh, ah.
So,
To make it better.
the first one is the little trail here that goes to the high school. I went out and visited this site. This trail ends at a fence,
and it's a detention basin for the high school. The school has no intention of tying this to any trail system. It doesn't, the trail along Midas Creek actually runs on the other side of the creek. I think it was a good idea at the time when the subdivision came in, but things changed as development moved along, and it's a trail to nowhere. And so, this is the plat that records it. You kind of zoom in there, you can kind of see it. Parcel A shows where it's at. And then this shows how it was deeded to us. What I think happened with this one is it was supposed to be deeded to the city but maintained by the HOA. You can see parcel B. Parcel B didn't exist on this plat anywhere. So there's two parcel A's. It became ours and maintained by us. So you can kind of see it there, and then there's the picture. There's a piece of sidewalk missing. There's a pile of gravel, and as you walk the
Someone stole
sidewalk.
our sidewalk?
I've been told that sidewalk or concrete does three things. It can get a guarantee. It gets hard, and what were the other things Justin Montes told me? No one's ever going to steal it was one of the things, but proof that that's not true. Someone stole it.
It will crack.
It'll crack. It'll get hard. And no one will steal it, but someone stole this. Anyway, and then if you walk this sidewalk, it's in disrepair. The concrete's cracked. It's in bad shape, and really, it's a trail to nowhere.
So if we abandon it, who gets it?
So this would,
We'd have to surplus.
we'd have to surplus it.
Is there an
It's
interest by one of the?
probable that the adjacent property owners, because I have not looked at these, so if we get them by deed, it's different than if we get them by plat. And it looks like we've got this by plat. So there are different animals.
And the plat would require what?
What animal is this?
Yeah, help us understand.
Plat is probably a vacation.
Vacation. So if it is a vacation, then would it go half and half to the two
Probably.
property owners?
To adjacent property owners.
Not the Hawaii kind of vacation, no.
Is there an HOA here though?
There is in the back corner. This is private, but this piece is deeded to us, so it would,
It's, I don't know if it's deeded,
or where it's dedicated to us.
yeah, that's a better word.
That's
Okay.
what parcel A is dedicated to Herriman, that's what that's in there, so.
But
if I
there's no
get to go
value
ahead
to
on
the city.
If you want us to move forward with the surplus, I'll work with John on the exact process, cause it'll have to come back to you, I have to notice it and go through all those things.
So yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yes.
Yes on that one.
This will tie into a conversation I'll be bringing up to you updates, because we have a lot of topics we can discuss.
Yes,
About
ma'am.
what to do.
Yes,
So what's the next one?
Yes on this one, alright, second one. This issue is a little more prevalent throughout the city, especially in the older part we call Old Town. The right-of-ways are around 110 feet wide. This one, we have 130th South. Somehow it was given to us. We researched it a bit. We actually have to go down to the county and get into their files because it's not scanned into the computers. So I told my staff, I said, let's don't do that yet. Let's wait until we hear what the council wants to do before we spend any more effort on it. The roads will only be 60 feet wide for our local roads through here. And so as I visited out on the site, you can see through the right-of-way, there's an existing shed, there's a garden, there's some other stuff, fences. It's kind of being used as private property right now. And so we'd have to do a little engineering to go forward with this to figure out how much of it we'd want to surplus. It wouldn't be a full vacate or whatever, the whole right-of-way, it would just be some of it. So I don't know, get direction on this one if we want to move forward.
And there's no possibility whatsoever in the future that we're gonna need that right away.
Not the 110.
It was talked a long time ago, running the storm water down through that way, Old Town, as we.
No
people
tracks,
know where that
lines,
happens.
no public transportation, anything like that.
It's not on any of our capital facility plans for a future major road or anything.
More than 60.
Yeah, it'd just be a local, we'd go back
I
to,
think that you should do the preliminary engineering that needs.
By the way,
understand.
is this way over 20 years ago? This is back in the county.
So this would be another vacation then,
what this will,
possibly.
if the property goes back as a vacation, you do 25 feet this way, so half go, I guess let's go to that property, 25
Like,
feet.
is this, that part of that old Brigham Young plat?
Yeah, that's why we're
I think it
digging
is.
into it, it's,
It's the big wide road right away that he drew up back in the day.
yeah.
It's very old.
It will help with, if these people, this shed, they're talking about building onto it, and right now, They can't, it's in the right of way, exceeds the setbacks. It would help them with widening that garage and things.
Not even setback.
It's that.
But currently it's sitting on our property.
Yes.
It's more of.
So I do not encourage people to build structures on our property hoping that we will vacate them. Let's make that clear.
Is that the reason why this is coming to us right now, is because of those structures?
We've been looking at these for a while. This structure is something that came up while we were looking at these. as
And
we're
just,
talking
and
property.
to be clear, cause we've had this issue come up where we've required people to remove structures or anything remotely resembling a structure, landscaping, all of that off of property that is the city's, and that is our stance, and that needs to remain clear. So if we do this, it is certainly not to make it easier for a property owner that built on property that wasn't theirs. It would simply be because we do not need that, width of road. I just think that's gotta be clear, or you're gonna have problems.
Should we-
So this becomes a bigger discussion.
know.
It's coming.
And this shed, I think, has been there for, I don't know, a long time. The people that live in that house have lived there their whole lives, and they're in their 80s, and I think their parents live there. So the shed's been there about that long.
So I'm a yes, because we don't need the width of the road, with my caveat that just reaffirming what our policy is as a city.
So move forward with this one too?
Yes.
Okay. All right, item number 3. This one is a detention basin out by 7530 West. This subdivision was called Mustang Meadows. When we did the storm drain pipe that went down McHouston Avenue, I knew we'd talk about McHouston tonight, so. That routed the flows a different direction than our master plan had always shown. And it actually, with the new Ivory development, we were able to get the flows into their pond. So this pond became unnecessary at this point. And as we visited the site, here's the plat, shows where it was deeded to it, or dedicated to us. Parcel A is dedicated to the city for a trail and storm drain easement. There is a pipe that would go through here, so we would keep an easement for the storm drain, but parcel, we don't really need. And I'll kind of show you what the issue is here. We have 2 property owners with this parcel between them. These guys would really like to have, I don't know if they care as much to have a driveway, but these guys really want to put a fence up. And this was left kind of a mess. It's really steep, it's hard to maintain. And since it's not needed for a pond anymore, they could have the property, they could fill it in, and it would not be an eyesore anymore after. So this is one
Yes,
to move
thumbs
forward
up.
with. Great. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
We got 3 now? All right, great. And so the last one here is Cabin Trail Way. This is 14300 South. As developments occurred over the years, you can see that it's been kind of blocked off. I'll show a zoom in on this, but only half the road's been dedicated. 25 feet back on a plat when it was in the county is when it was platted, or given to the county and then come to the city. So there it is, 25 feet dedicated solid county. And as you visit the site, you can see there are homes that took half the right of way, one blocked it all the way, so this is not needed next to these 2 homes here any longer for right of way.
Is this our friend?
Yeah, have we had issues on this?
We had issues down here with this property. These are different properties. This is the one that had the stormwater issue that was flooding.
No, you know who I'm talking about, don't you? Yeah, okay.
This is still the access to those 2 properties though, clearly.
So it'd be left as a cross-access easement between them, but right now, we're liable for maintenance and
But
upkeep.
As far as dedication for future roadway. Give the onus back to them for maintenance.
So this is the driveway.
Yep. Okay.
Sounds good.
1, 2, 3, 4, great. All right, that's all I got. That'll be easy. I don't have to know which one I don't have to do. I'll just do them
So,
all.
by the way, that was a really nice way for you to show us these
Yes,
with your animations and
Oh.
the various pictures, so well done.
All right.
It was nice of you.
I'll have a report for you September 11th.
All right,
PowerPoint course really paid off.
All that kind of stuff.
Dollars,
We move on to 3.5 auto mall ordinance discussion.
Okay, just real briefly, next week at the planning commission, they're going to see an amendment to the auto mall zone. Basically, we've been wrestling how to allow used auto sales, but not allow them to be perpetual. John and Brent have now found a way to do that. So the first step, you're gonna do this in two parts. We're gonna bring this to the planning commission, and then to you, it's gonna strip out all the words that say used auto mall, so all auto sales. So that will just be taken out of the ordinance. And then John and Brent are gonna be back to the planning commission, some of the most special language you've seen that would allow for like a 2-year process and then disappear. The words are fantastic, but you're gonna see it in 2
It will
weeks.
be. And legally solid?
Yes, John said these words with
It's gonna
any.
make me cry. It'll make me
Really? Oh, I'll bring some tissues.
Is this gonna cause any problems future partners?
Nope, this is all being coordinated, so this will come to you in 2 different sessions. So you'll see it once to take it out, and then coming again to put something else different in.
Prepared to be amazed.
That's what I'm telling you, John, it's been shocking off. So we'll make sure it goes, the regular, well, we wanna get it into your regular meeting so it gets approved quickly and then move on with the other piece, so for all.
Yeah. All right, we will move on to item, our 3.6, which is our city manager updates.
I have a lot for you. It's all gonna be hopefully quick.
30 minutes.
Mitch, you wanna pull up the school's presentation? Oh, he's got the clicker.
Just go for it.
Get it, hold on. On camera, struggling with my back.
No, like,
This is so embarrassing. I'm just gonna come back here. You were hard.
Y'all quiet over there now.
Just getting their butt kicked by a plastic bag, it's okay.
Move forward, move forward. Just one way in. Okay, go.
Okay.
Just stop.
So I remember me talking to you about, when I was sitting at, Province Hall graduation in the spring, that I was amazed on the caliber of kids that were
You
graduating.
misspelled elementary. Come on.
He's way elementary.
Quickly put a C in there, please.
So you know what I'll do.
It's French, go with it.
So, go with it, just,
All right, I'm sorry I brought it up.
so,
It's elementary.
anyway, I met with all 8 elementary, principals and all of the junior high, middle schools. They have different terminology. Junior high, when you're talking about Province Hall, middle school, when you talk about Jordan School District. So we have 4 high schools, and we visit all of these. I was telling you, I was gonna have these updates, and we talked about safety and safe walking routes, how they work with our GIS department, our engineering department, work for our HPD, make the school routes safe. It was amazing to me in Province Hall, though. Remember I told you about this, that $1.6 million for giving out in tuition. One girl got $187,000 from University of Utah, and I thought it was amazing. So we talked about if they would email Tammy, our communications department, their stories, because these are great stories, and it's part of our whole Herriman culture. We are Herriman, and I thought, it's easy when it's Herriman High and Herriman Elementary is pretty well branded itself, but we've gone way beyond that in Fort Herriman as a middle school. And so, what my shock and awe, to Gordon's words, is to talk about how many kids we got coming out here and going to school every day. So look at these numbers. By the way, we have some phenomenal principals, and we've been truly fortunate to attract such a high caliber of people out there. So this is the middle schools. Remember that last total? You keeping track? Have a look at that. You add those together. This is the rest of them of the elementaries. 7,345 kids going to elementary school in Herriman.
Oh, that's all the elementaries.
Cool stuff, right? We don't have a local for Ridgeview down there yet, but it will become when the kids decide what that's going to be. The middle schools, 4,051. Okay. The high schools, 4,416. Every day, these kids are going to our schools.
Nice looking logo on it.
15,812 kids go to school in Herriman every day.
Wow.
What's shocking to me is there's good stories out there to be told. You're gonna hear one of them tonight during the general meeting. But we've asked them to share their stories with Tammy and our communication team so we can get our message out about We Are Herriman. But also we talked about partnering with our police department and working with them closely on issues that are popping up in, especially, I hate to say this, in middle schools. It seems like that's where kids are really trying to find themselves a little bit more, have a little more energy. But we had a phenomenal journey, meet with all your principals and interacting with them. You look at this, you know, I remember when we was begging Jordan School District to build Herriman Elementary School over 20 years ago. And then the high school and then the Fort Herriman. So it's been a great journey for me to see this happen. But man, they got some great stories out there and we want to share them with you. We'll do some follow-ups with our HPD, with those schools. And you know, you voted to put school resource officers in the middle schools with the support of Jordan School District. And Providence Hall pays for our SRO at their high school and shared with their junior high, were you correct? And Chief, you've kind of branched off with your DARE program, because all those eight elementaries is hard for, and all of them don't do it right now, but they want to. Atlos wants to do it, but they don't afford it yet. But kind of branched that off because it's on Jake's plate, and so
We're maxed out on DARE right now, and so we're using some of our other school officers to fill in, like one at Black Ridge. And a lot of that's opportunity for these officers. They want to go to teach school. Believe it or not, that's one of the reasons they want to be in the school. You know, they enjoy the time with the kids, but they also want to teach. And so we're giving them some of that opportunity, again, with DARE America expanding through high school. Our officers are now teaching components of that through all 3 different levels. And we've got the DARE Jeep coming up, so that'll be something fantastic. We'll be doing videos in coordination with communications on the DARE Jeep. We've gotten donations from community partners well outside of Herriman that want to be part of our program because we're the pilot for the nation right now. And so you'll see pretty soon this Jeep that is largely donated come to life, and we're going to do it in segments. So it's going to be pretty cool.
Nice.
So we're still going with the program of having the kids design it. So one kid designs it and wins it, their name's on it, and we run that design for a year around. We do believe that this Jeep's probably going to be going all over Utah. It'll be pretty active. So we're the leader in the DARE program for sure.
And we're a
Do you have
leader
a
in
driver position
having the most
also?
high schools in one city.
Cutting what?
I think we're a leader in the most high schools in one city. We've definitely
We do have
grown
a
up.
driver.
I think about a third of our population goes to school every day here in Herriman. That's what the numbers just went crazy on my head. I just went, wow, this is fun stuff. We put that much emphasis on
You wonder
our
why it's a nightmare getting in and out of any school
Right.
around here.
And as we look back over this, Brett and I had talked quite a bit about that number of people, that number of our future. We think that's why it's important for the police department to be interacting with and the fire department. So we partnered to do that quite heavily. And that's why I've always thought it was important to be a component of that.
Great.
And our big push here still is getting We Are All Herriman, right? Okay.
It's a great phrase.
It's
It's great phrase. Well done on all the time you put in, Brett,
It's
on
been
this
actually
initiative.
a great journey to be with them. Yes, I can't say anything but phenomenal marks on all your principals. I say they're yours, or they're your community, part of our community every day. Do want to talk, Alan Ray, you don't know this, but Alan, I want to talk about, we just got another update on our sales tax last week. What blows my mind is we're still increasing our sales tax. It's still increasingly to go more and more. And I have my own thoughts about where we're headed, which is good, but it just, we won't tell Gordon what that is because he won't want to spend it.
I saw it.
You saw it. So Alan, you want to talk about the increases off the top of your head?
Well, our distribution in August was 535,000, which is about 90,000 more than last August. It's about 40,000 more than February, which is the Christmas month. So this is by far our highest month. We did get our population finally increased by the state from 39,000 to 44,000, which is helping with the sales tax. It's still not what it is.
Still well below where we are.
But we are currently almost 19% above last year to date in sales tax. That's all.
It's good news though.
Yeah.
Because the end of the year, it means we're gonna have some, it should be a good year for us, that's all I'm gonna keep it. Also wanted to just, recognize, GFOA has recognized Herriman City again, best, budget presentation, for last year, not just the one we just submitted, they're about a year behind. So the 2018-2019 cycle, would that be correct, Alan? And, it's, when you talk about presentations, it's so, how, you know how it is, it's easy to read, it's easy to follow, it's easy to find out what we're doing. And that takes a whole team, and the word that actually says, you know, your finance department, internally, we know it's broader than just the finance
Your
department.
word says finance department and communications department. It says both.
You made sure of that, didn't
It
you?
should be, so, the next year will probably be, hopefully be corrected, but it does demonstrate that we're very strong.
Tammy made sure.
I believe we're still 1 year behind, but we've received it for 5 years now.
Never ending
So it'll be 6 if we get this next year,
We're
so.
so old.
Great, achievement. Wanted to, let's see, liquor store opened up today. Sherry attended, didn't open it, sorry, to be correct. And a tour of it today.
Opens Friday.
And there was no testing, tasting. I just wanted
They
to-
said you could have drinks, but
Yeah,
they
they
really
do
meant for
serve
water
drinks.
sitting there.
But,
Couldn't sample the
to
merchandise.
see what they've done, this is one of the stores that the first of its kind has been, is more open, it's more modern, it's more inviting to the people that are patronizing that
Is the
facility.
size comparable?
A lot bigger.
Bigger.
13,000 square feet. So, they figure this will be, their biggest thing right now is in West Valley, and they figure because the location and convenient is, you'll tie with that one.
And we
But,
invite South Georgia
the bigger
residents to
stories
come
are
patronize.
what the state does with some of that money, and they put it into education programs and try to get parents educated so there's not that adolescent drinking problem and issues. So some good stuff comes out of it. But like I said, it was a great facility to see.
How do they work the revenue on, I honestly don't know this question, how do they work the revenue on alcohol sales? Do we get
Sales
our
tax.
same point of sale, so
Yep.
they don't, even though it's state owned and operated, they don't change
We
the.
get our state portion,
Well,
Okay.
they said that the West
And then
Valley
0.6
store
of
was what,
theirs.
9.4 million last year?
9.3
9.3 million, and then
revenue.
in revenue, and they would anticipate that ours would be pretty comparable to that.
Okay.
And we get half.
They originally
That's a mouthful.
projected to get 60.
You know it.
No property.
So, want to let Justin talk a minute about fall cleanup. How you want us to approach that?
So I've got a quick handout. You wouldn't mind taking one. So after, after spring cleanup last time, we kind of brought a few issues to you that we ran into.
Like the camping, I'll never forget the picture of the camper.
The camper?
Yeah, the camper was great. And so there are many other issues, hazardous waste, paint, all those
Tires,
things.
yeah.
And so, moving forward with the fall cleanup, obviously we did the spring. The county came in and did one August, I think, July, August. And then we're gonna do another one here in the fall. The thought behind the one in the fall is to kind of change it a little bit and kind of do a pilot to see if we can mitigate some of those issues that we saw during the spring cleanup. The county has the same issues we do. Some of the biggest issues, like I alluded to, are tires, mattresses, paint. Other issues are you have contractors that are using them and filling it up, and what that does is it adds more weight, which adds more cost when we go and dump it. So we're looking at doing it for 2 locations. The 2 locations we've kind of picked now are Butterfield Park which is kind of a central location to the south, Tuscany Park, kind of to the north. The reason we picked those as well is they have larger areas where we can get these dumpsters in and out. And so as you kind of look through here, the two locations I talked to, we're looking about 1 week per location. And we're looking to do these towards the end of September and into the first week of October. And so what the intent, like I said, is to try and manage this. We're looking at manning a person at the site during the entire time the dumpsters are there. And a lot of this is trying to educate our residents too on what they can and can't do. So as they're bringing things in, we can kind of regulate some of the things they're bringing, make sure they're not dumping the tires, appliances and all those things. And so that's actually an additional cost because we haven't done that in the past. We'll look at one driver to haul containers as they're full. The other thing is on Saturday, which is a busy day, we'll probably man that site with 2 people so one person doesn't get overrun. And then one driver, maybe 2, depending on how busy we are. The other thing we talked about is to try and cut down on some of the labor costs. I think you might have remembered Ed talking about how busy the dump is on Saturdays, and our truck drivers would be sitting, one load would take them an hour or 2 hours. So we talked about just, we have doing only one side at a time, we have more containers, and so on Saturday, we might just store those at Butterfield Park and haul them during the week when it's not as busy to cut down on some of those hours. And so we're looking at also a partner to handle some of the appliances we get. And so I've reached out to them, they're interested in doing that to where we would try and coordinate it during the same time where residents can come and drop off appliances and this company would take them free of charge. And so we're gonna try and work that out to correlate with this as well.
I have a weird question for you on them keeping them there. I remember at our board meeting the other day at Wasatch Front, they talked about keeping it in their trucks overnight really increases their risk because of fires and things like that. Obviously, we're gonna be monitoring that, but is that gonna be an issue with us keeping them like
I
that?
think this type of waste is a little different than household waste that they normally pick
It's
up.
not an
And so I
issue.
don't know that it would be too big of a concern. That's a good point to bring up. So if you look at the other side, myself and Monty and Ed met and tried to come up with some costs. It's hard to predict because we haven't really run this type of program before. So we kind of run down some costs here. Like I said, we'll do it for 1 week at each location. We'll have 1 employee there during the week to monitor, 2 employees on Saturdays, and 1 driver, possibly 2 on Saturday. But the labor costs we're looking at right around $4,800. Fuel costs are around $500, and we're kind of basing that off the spring cleanup and how much we use during the week. And then anticipated landfill costs around $35. Now that one can always change because you never know how much you're going to get. I reduced that a little bit. You can see during 1 week during the spring is about $2,400 a week. So I'm thinking that with people monitoring it, we're going to have less contractors doing this. Plus we've already had 2 cleanups this year. So the total cost we're looking at is around $8,800.
How's that compared to the other?
So the fall of last year was about 12 or 13,000.
That's what I thought was like pretty high.
The spring cleanup this year was 21,000.
That's the one I remember, and I remember it in the 20s.
Yeah.
So you're gonna man it 24/7?
No,
So they don't.
we'll have, so on
That
here,
was my question.
you can see I have on here the time. So the hours of operation will be 7 o'clock to 6, and that's when we'll have the dumpsters.
Then
Once
you'll
you
pull the
remove
dumpster.
The dumpsters will be full, and that's what we do on all of our cleanups anyways. They're generally out around 7, and we start picking them and taking them out around 6.
When we first started the program years ago, when we left them overnight, we ended up with stuff we can't dispose of very easy. Cost us money to take them other places.
So,
How do you feel about changing the direction a little bit, not,
Yeah, I think it's good.
narrow down locations?
Well, I
Cause
think-
last spring, we actually brought, what we did, and there was concern about we're not having enough locations, so. We're not sure we
Well,
get direction from you all.
It's a double-edged sword, really. You know, you open it up too much, and then you get, again, all of those other things that get thrown in there that now is the city's responsibility to deal with and to sort through and to find ways to dispose of them. this is a great educational tool, and again, we spent nearly over $20,000 in that. I think that, again, this is still an option. It requires some work on the part of the residents, and they have to recognize it requires some work on their part for a whole lot of benefit that comes to them at the cost of the city, and I think it's worth trying for once and see what the feedback is.
And so once we do this, then obviously next spring, which is our largest cleanup, we'll regroup, see how this one worked compared to our others, and then we'll open it up to more sites around the city.
Yeah.
But we're just trying to see how this compares to others, and so,
I like
we'll
it.
readdress that.
I don't think you ever have enough sites, you know what I mean? I think somebody will always complain that it's not close enough to them or things like that. They're always, yeah, there'll always be that
Right.
issue, but I think that this is two general locations that they can go to that won't cost them, other than trying to get it there.
I think Ben's concern is a lot of households don't have the mechanism to
Exactly.
get it to a
A pickup
location.
truck or anything, yeah.
And we watch people walk a half a mile with their wheelbarrow loaded and put it in the dumpster, so.
Yeah.
So did I miss any mommy or Ed, is that, been all covered?
But the best thing it does encourage people to clean their yards and their houses, so. Okay, Blake, wanna give us updates on Houston?
Yeah. Let me look at my time sheet here. Nope, I had it written down, I was ready for this. So, our design's complete, it's just not built. That's what I no. Our right-of-way acquisition, I've got 3 people, I actually ran into one at the gas station last night and talked to them about it. And, it was interesting. The discussion went good until I said, "Can I come out and get a signature?" and never did hear it. So, I've got 3 people still hanging out there. 2 of them told me they would sign. We've taken them the deeds and just, things haven't lined up. I'm hoping to get that squared away. We've kind of missed this paving season now. I don't think we'll get in and get it done this season. So I've got till about January to work those deals out. With the new ordinance, I think we've got some extra ammunition that we've never had before, so we'll go give that a shot, try it out. At that time, I wanna start preparing contract docs in November, and then bid the project at the end of January. It's a great time to go out and bid, we can get some good prices. And then we gotta start thinking about school, because this is the Walk-Around of the school, so it might not be beneficial to start the project and rush it in March to get it done. We'll look at the timelines when we get there, but I think it's gonna be beneficial to see when school ends and start it the day after school ends and just get it done. It's probably gonna be
That 30-day window.
a 4-week project to really get it done, 4 to 5 weeks. And I think we can get it done during school break next summer. And as long as we can get the property squared away, which I think we will be able to.
So let's set a deadline, let's say we are going to talk to these 3 property owners by this date and have an answer of whether or not it's gonna work or not. Okay, so can we set that kind of deadline today, just to say, cause if you're thinking November, let's say, what day do we need to say, we have contacted all of these and we either have a signature or we went with the ordinance?
Provided the residents cooperate. I mean, isn't that the challenge, is you've tried to reach out with them and you're just missing them?
The ordinance doesn't give us feet to go on the property, it just creates a mechanism.
Right.
So-
But we can we just, you know what I'm saying, I'm just saying,
Yep.
because I guarantee you, things blew up in our neighborhood when school started back again, and that road is still like it is, and the trails, and the concrete walking is a mess, there's dirt all over the sidewalk from construction, they piled dirt over the top of it, and it's a mess, right? And there's a crossing guard there, and people are not happy, lots of people are not happy, which you already know. And so I would like to have some way of saying, we are going to have a yes or a no.
Yeah,
Right?
so we're gonna start discussions next week with them.
Oh, perfect.
And so we'll start the discussions, and that's, if we end up going to, say, condemnation, then that could take us some time. So
Yeah,
we have a certain process, I have to get documents and things in hand, and I have to have fair offers. So there's a whole process we have to follow, and that's kind of what's taking the time here, is we gotta make sure we follow the process. 'Cause if we miss a step, then we can't condemn,
Sure.
and we have to start back over.
Totally respect that. I guess I just wanted to be able to say, look, we're gonna be contacting them next week, and then we're gonna know what our process is gonna have to be, and whether we're gonna have to go down that path or whether or not.
I would suggest that we just make this a required update for every meeting until we get to the point where we know we're
Yeah,
Hey, Jackie's on.
that'd be great.
Moving forward, striking down that.
Just a quick, yes, this is what's going on.
Okay, I can give an update on that one.
Okay, that's awesome, thank you.
Okay, we need to take a minute and talk about the Danzy house. Update.
So today, we had the monumental cabin moving. Can we pull the video up that time lapse? It was a little, made me a little nervous, but
I was so impressed when I saw it sitting up there.
there they go.
There they go.
So it has been moved off of the property that Ivory's developing and moved up by the Danzy home. We showed the staff picture, none of that matters. And this is the amazing staff that pulled this off today, and have been working on it for the last couple days to get it all braced and ready to go. Dwayne Dumas really led the charge on this, and he did an amazing job. I couldn't be more happy and proud to call these my coworkers, so they deserve a big round of applause for getting this done for us. This is not the permanent location for it, but it's where it's gonna sit until we figure out what to do with the property. As far as the Danzy house itself, I had an inspector come out last week to test for asbestos. I have not received those reports back yet. I should have had them today and I haven't seen them. I'll be meeting with a gentleman next week who is a restoration masonry expert. And so he's gonna come out and look at what's underneath and see, give us an idea of what we're working with and what we're dealing with, so. It's an exciting project, it'll be a lot of fun if it all works out. The home is 150 years old, and so it's definitely worth taking these steps to make sure that we're not taking down something that we really should be preserving, so it's exciting.
Good job.
Fun
Okay,
space.
there's a couple more things. We're just gonna talk about the Mountain Ridge development. We had a neighborhood meeting last week or whatever. Probably need to postpone that to the next meeting. We need some updates on it because there's some other conversations out of that. If we want to stay later, we can get back into that. Gordon wanted to get some dialogue going on with you on that, but there was a neighborhood meeting and want to give you feedback on that meeting and what direction we're going, and the developer's been contacted by one of you, and so he may invite you to all the neighborhood meetings going forward.
The neighborhood meetings as part of our community facilitator program? Well, so we ought to start this discussion at the outset with the very fundamental process that there was a separation between this body and the neighborhood meeting by design. And so to deviate from that, I think takes away from the very important checks and balances that we
I
put in
think we need
place
to go
for
back and have that conversation, is what I'm getting at. My partner is gone, but we've had to date 30 neighborhood meetings since we implemented, so it's been a great success.
And so I will just say, I think it is successful, and I don't think you mess with something that's working well.
Yeah,
But I'm willing to discuss it.
I just wish I
Share
knew the
that again.
timeline, because Gordon scrolled out of here, but he saw it on my list. And the last thing I want to talk about is the encroachment on city property. Last 30 seconds or so. I alluded to about other properties. Remember the gentleman that went about almost 2 acres or half acre down on city property, put a pole house, and the city's council director wants to remove it. Another guy went and put a basketball court and fire pit, and he was told to remove it. We have now discovered more problems, and have actually contacted a few council members about, we've given them notice. They got fence, sheds, of course, on city property. We have one that has a significant wall up by Unicole that gets real close to a new pool. His money used, making money to buy that property from the Butterfield Trust. The house and everything, when encroachment on the park was before we took it down. It didn't fight until we actually flew with drawing the property lines. So we're trying to figure out how do we navigate through all this, because on his other hand, he's talking about these, being a surplus and there's no value. Most of these have value because it is given a density bonus for their PDU requirement when it comes to the process. And we've always been perplexed about that. If we keep on, there's a lot of people that encroach down our city property. But I want to have a discussion with you, maybe the possibility, because it hurts. I mean, one guy, as we know, was very blatant. I think there was some mistake on some of these other people's part. They assumed, because our fence line was here, they decided they could put the fence line and line up with it. It's a trough of issues coming up, but I think possibly if we take in the spirit of, it was deemed as open space and there's dying open space for how many acres we're supposed to get for the PDU process. We have in our current capital facilities plan that if a developer comes through and cannot give us enough open space for a previous requirement, he can give us the cash value to go up by other open space. So let's take it through this, maybe we give a possibility, we say, okay, we don't have no adverse effect for the city's operation, but they still possibly need to buy that property from the city and put it into a bucket to go buy other open space. That's possibly, just hear me out, just an idea. And then they have to pay for all the costs to have the plat replatted, all the surveying and everything done. It's still painful for them, but it also gives us a doorway to go through to go get open space we really truly need, and that's programmable open space. Just a thought.
Yeah.
I can see you rubbing your head already.
Well, I just worry that when you're making exceptions, you've then opened up the Pandora's box that you can never close again. And how do you then go back to those that you were very adamant with and explain that this situation is different than theirs? And I don't even want to begin to try and decide what the intent was of a property owner. That's very subjective. I think you've got to stay consistent and firm and not play favorites or appear to play favorites at all.
So we'll have Blake, because he had the best looking presentation. We'll gather all the projects we know to date, which is a lot of them.
Okay.
And we'll talk through each one of them. It's like we did those four, there'll be a lot more than four, guaranteed. There's anywhere from a foot or two to 10 feet, to 9 feet, to 20 feet. 10 foot feet by 200 feet long. Of encroachments, and these were discovered in the last few weeks.
And it's not a lack of compassion, it's just you can't inject compassion into policy, or all of a sudden you've become subjective, so.
So there's some issues, I mean, like the one that I sent you the other day, when I look at the pictures, and part of their frustration is, they're like, look at this mess, they're like, here, look at this mess the city has behind us, how come, they're saying we're encroaching and they take no care of like this, they're like, then you come in and maintain it, cause all we're doing is dealing with your weeds all the time.
It's Herriman grasses.
Which is a fair point.
Well,
That's why we get told by
but no,
developers.
I hear you, but they're like, this dries out and it's a big fire hazard from our backyard, you guys come and take care of it then, or else you need to allow us to take,
It's a
figure it
fair
out.
point, but by no means does that mean that, in my opinion, by no means does that mean that you can now claim it as your
No,
own.
I agree 100%.
And build structures on it and put your fence on it. Enforcement isn't my
Sure.
take on this.
And the ones that were just recently sent to me, these are brand new owners, that this stuff was built on there, just that they buy it like that, and they're like, what do you mean our garage isn't our garage?
But that should, I mean, that's all part of a due process in
Yeah.
purchasing
I
a
said that.
property.
Which is not a city,
Which
that's
is
not a
not.
city.
Right.
You know, regardless of how it's sold, they should go through the title searches and the surveys and everything that's accompanying with that. I don't think that that's a valid argument to say
I hear
this
ya.
is how it was, because
Sure.
there was a responsibility on their part to know exactly what it was that they were buying when they get to it. I get it causes issues for them, sympathetic, but not to the point to where I'm willing to bend on what our policy
Sure.
is.
But I think again, it's like we look at this just like we just did with those other properties and go, yeah, why do we have this mess right there? Does it cost us more? Do we get any benefit out of having that little strip right there, or do we get more benefit out of making them maintain it? You know what I mean? Those
And-
kind of conversations.
And prior to having this discussion, what I want to know how we've dealt with it in the past and what our policy dictates. Because what I don't wanna do is get into a thumbs up, thumbs down
Yes.
that is based on each property. No, I want a set of guidelines by which I'm looking at all of the properties, so that again, there's equity and fairness in the
Correct.
treatment of them.
Okay, that's why I was looking for some sense of direction. I think we have it. So next, well, here again, how much of a council will have, I think this discussion needs to be heard by all five, not
Yeah,
a few.
for sure.
And I'm sure, because what direction I hear, the property owner will be upset if it gets delayed.
We need to go.
Were you
Yeah,
able to
just
finish
like,
on?
we brought up Mountain Ridge just a little bit and talked about community, it would be bring that back to.
Were you finished with, management updates, Brett, or do we need to come back?
Where we going? That's it.
Okay, I'll accept the motion to
Motion
adjourn
to adjourn to our
Second.
city meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
Gordon.